Well, Uncle Mark,
Yes.
you're sitting over there looking for all the world like a monkey with glasses.
Well, maybe that's all I am.
One wonders.
One does wonder.
One looks at the ape world and at the human world, and one begins to ask questions.
The similarities with the simians that we share.
Which is the title of our new memoir.
Uncle Doug is a monkey. Because he's not here. So,
yeah, exactly.
So, evolution.
Yeah.
Which is only a theory.
I like that you emphasize the evil in it.
Well, the only way I can say evolution is the way Richard Dawkins says it.
Evolution.
Evolution. So, what is it? What is it not?
Right.
How can it be used to confirm all my racial hatreds and misogynist fantasies?
It's a great question.
So we've back in episode 22, we had a little discussion.
We did with Aaron Ra.
With our friend Aaron Ra and his big brain, and talked about, some interesting issues with evolution. But it's a big subject that requires more than one conversation, I think.
And that conversation got a little heady. We need some more conversation for sure.
Yes, so we've decided to bring in somebody that doesn't look like a warlock.
Oh, okay.
And that is our friend Professor Nathan, who is a professor of biological anthropology, specializing in anthropological genetics, whatever the fuck that bullshit is.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like a real thing.
And an all-around smarty pants. So welcome, Professor Nathan.
Oh, it's great to be here.
Yeah, was all that stuff he said real?
Yeah.
Okay.
Too many syllables, I know.
Yeah, I know. How do you even fit that on a business card?
College boy.
Right?
So
all right, college boy. Can we just call you that for the rest of the interview?
Sure.
So, there may be people, plenty of people listening to us have long emerged from religion, but there are people who are still emergent from their religious backgrounds who may not really know how to even begin to talk or think about this big idea.
Yeah, what we have here is a country in a world that has a lot of folk in it who reject the entire study that you have devoted your life to.
Yes, yeah.
Not only that, but has delivered your life to you.
Well, even my own grandmother, when I told her I was doing anthropology, said that's what people who don't know what they want to do with their lives do. So
oh, man.
it's
Sick burn, Grandma.
Is your grandma
Yeah, it's
listening
pretty
to this episode?
probably not. No.
Oh, what a bitch.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. I'm glad to see you've evolved from 2 generations ago. So.
Yeah, I try not to let it get to me.
Yeah.
So, what we got is a bunch of folk who have been told their whole lives that the way humans and all the critters happened was that God done it, and
That's right.
and it just threw them all on here, and then we're all done.
Yeah.
And you maintain, I take it, that is probably not the case.
I of course I disagree. Yeah.
So let's start. So I think there's 2 ways to approach this, and we'll do both ways. So pretend I don't know anything. Obviously I'm a genius, so you don't have to.
Yeah, I don't know why I'm here.
Yeah, exactly. So pretend I don't know anything about evolution and explain it to me, and then we'll explore what it is not a little later on.
Yeah, pretend that Uncle Mark has evolved a big brain with a good prefrontal cortex.
If you saw my feet, you'd be like, "Dear God."
Yeah.
He's a hobbit. So what do we got? What is evolution as it pertains to life on this here planet Earth?
So if we're speaking very generally, it's just change over time. So,
well, that's obviously not real. That never happens.
Yeah. So evolution is, here we're talking in a biological context. And so what we're talking about is populations changing pretty subtly over generations and generations, so that when many generations have passed, we can see fairly large changes. So, if you go back, say, 200,000 year plus, we might not see humans like we think of them now, but we're going to see something that's pretty human-like.
Right. And these are now we're talking about the fossil record.
Yeah. Yes, I'm sorry. I guess I jumped in a little bit there.
Well, no, I mean, it's just important to talk about this because here's the thing. You got your Ken Hams of the world. You got your guys who devote their lives to saying that the Bible is real and all of these bones that that paleontologists or whatever are finding in the ground don't prove any damn thing.
Yeah.
They're a bunch of damn lies. So we
Planted by
have
Satan.
Exactly. And we have to talk about the fossil record. But what are the motivations of this process? How does this occur over time?
Well, there's lots of actually different ways that evolution can occur. The one that people have most commonly heard of is natural selection. Quite frankly, it's part of my specialization, so I find it most interesting. But species can change randomly. They can change through interbreeding. If there's different populations with different characteristics, they can change through mutation. But most
mutants, I knew it.
Yeah,
I knew we were getting to the X-Men at some point.
I saw those documentaries. They're very frightening.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for the knives to come out of my fists. I'm pretty sure it's going to happen.
But most of the time, when somebody is saying evolution, they're talking about natural selection, right? And again, that's because it's the most interesting one. It's the one that is always kind of
So talk
at
about
the
that
front.
mechanism. How does that work?
So natural selection really. So you hear phrases like survival of the fittest, which I'm not a big fan of. That's a phrase that comes out of social Darwinism rather than science. But the idea is each generation is going to change a little bit. So not everything that's in the current generation, not everybody who's in the current generation is going to be in the next one, right? So people have different numbers of kids. Some people die. So each new generation, my kids, right? I don't think you guys have kids.
No.
My kids represent me in the next generation. Those who don't reproduce aren't in the next generation. And so we see this shift in how common something is, right? So anything I carry is going to be more common in the next generation than anything that you guys carry. Right. I'm just gloating at this point, but
No, I'm happy for that, actually.
Yeah, it's probably for the best.
I'm a narcissist, so
Well, and we're dingbats. So.
And podcasting is not an inheritable trait, thank God.
It might be. Yeah. Who knows? It's probably viral. It's probably carried on. Anyway.
So the name of the game then is really reproduction, which is, everybody knows that, right?
Right.
But so you hear about survival of the fittest a lot, or it's about who survives and who doesn't, and that matters, of course. But it's also about, and maybe more so, about who reproduces, who doesn't, in what quantities.
Well, and a lot of that can be, if a species sort of, for whatever reason, they survive better when the males are really big and strong, then the females start to choose big, strong mates or prefer big, strong mates, and then that just sort of passes that down. Is that sort of part of the deal?
Yeah, so the reasons that somebody might reproduce more or less, et cetera, are huge, right? It could be, that they are better suited to gain the attention of the opposite sex. It could be that they kill people of the same sex, and so they're the only option. It could be just that they're better at acquiring food. It just goes on and on.
Sneaky. I like the ones that evolve sneaky genes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the sneaky gene is Dawkins' next book, I think.
I think it was going to be his first book, but it's too sneaky. Anyway. Sorry.
Poor Nathan
going.
just stares at us like,
I know.
Oh my God.
It's like he's watching. He's watching evolution in action, in reverse.
Yeah.
So
Millions of years, and yet here we are.
right,
Here we are.
So the anti-evolutionists, the creationists, would say this hasn't happened. There's no proof that this has happened. How do you respond to that?
Right, and it comes down to the other idiot thing they say, which is it's only a theory.
Yeah, and that argument is mostly creationists trying to, intentionally or not, I usually don't know or care for that matter, but trying to divert from the actual science and just use the words themselves to discredit it. It's a semantic thing, and it's incredibly frustrating because a theory in science, of course, is not a guess, it's not a hunch, it's not a feeling, it's not even just an idea. It is a body of hypotheses and ideas that have been tested over and over again, and it's not beyond fallibility. I mean, we hold evolution in high esteem, but it's technically still true that we could find something that would drastically change our view of its correctness. But what's so unique about it, or not unique, but what is exceptional about it, is that it's been tested over and over. It's been put to that any time we study anything biological, that result is going to tell us something about the validity of the evolutionary process. And with time, it's just been upheld over and over and over again.
Right. It's, I mean, for the layman like Dan and I, I would we venture into the dangerous realm of calling it fact. I mean, it is this is a factual
it's something
set
that
of processes.
It's like we can't talk about human evolution that much because it's something that happens over millions of years, but we've observed evolution occurring.
Yeah, so I mean, if you want to expand it, you can talk. I mean, evolution is just a change in how common something is, and sometimes that means very large changes. But if this generation we have, 60% of people have brown eyes, and next generation 62% of people have brown eyes, we'd call that evolution. It's boring, really boring, but it's still a change.
Right, we're getting taller as a species.
Yeah, I've heard that, and I guess I don't know exactly what the cause is there.
It's just height is the cause.
Yes,
Measurement is the cause.
Yeah,
increased height, right?
All right, our measuring tapes have gotten a lot more sophisticated over the years.
They really have,
and we no longer use
our cubits.
Forearms.
Yeah.
But one hypothesis there that I'm familiar with is that a shift to modernization. We demonize, and talk about obesity in the modern realm. But when modernization occurs, we do see this kind of normal increase in height and weight as the stress of not having enough food is lifted. So I don't know if that's truly evolution or if that's just cultural change. But I'm not an expert on that particular question.
But when people, I just want to point out that like when people talk about, well, evolution doesn't, because I've been to creation museums and they've got answers for all of the things that they think are being taught out there. Now they're not good answers.
No, they're not.
I mean, like
they're funny.
If you go to Ken Ham's Ark encounter, you're going to see, and they'll talk about, well, it wasn't species. It wasn't two of every species that was put on the Ark.
To every kind.
Of every kind.
Yeah.
Which is what? What does that mean?
What does that mean?
Nobody knows.
But they're very insistent that microevolution can happen within a kind, but there's not proof ever that one species has evolved into another species.
It is in such gaps that their God resides.
Yes,
right?
indeed, yeah.
Well, it's pretty convenient that a process that takes thousands, if not millions of years is not observable within a lifetime, and so they can rely on that lack of... What I see quite commonly is that they're expecting to see this with their eyeballs.
Right.
Like that.
Right.
That's the only way to observe something. Right? And
well, but here's what's crazy is we can observe with our eyeballs. So, for instance, we can get into this in more detail, the canard that there are no transitional fossils, which is something that the creationists love to go on and on about. Whereas we can see loads of transitional fossils from one form to another, in the dirt with our eyeballs. We literally have transitional fossils.
yeah, absolutely. And as a geneticist, my specialty, the similarities between, you name it, really. But let's just take, humans, Neanderthals, chimpanzees, the other great apes, is fairly overwhelming. And we know things like the same shape, right? So you can look at animals that look very similar in characteristics can be fairly genetically distant. There's not this one-to-one relationship necessarily between genetic similarity and physical similarity. Now, usually things that are genetically related are pretty similar physically too, but they don't have to be.
Right.
So the question I always ask is, okay, if this is the result of creation or a common designer, why is the design such that things that, appear similar have similar DNA? There's no reason that has to be true.
Right.
But it is.
Well, there's no reason for DNA at all, really. I mean, it's frankly, I find I'm glad about having my body, and I'm happy that I get to move around in this world. But it's not a great design.
Oh yeah.
Can we agree on this?
Sure.
Like, this thing is a kind of a turd in terms of like a lot of things.
I mean, we probably should get some people in here who have like higher self-esteem and see if that's idea
it's
still.
a podcast. That's not possible.
Yeah, we're not doing that.
Those people are on television.
But I'm just talking about, you know, like my breathe hole and my food hole are the same hole, so I can choke on things. Like, you know, just little things like that. That would be a great thing to change, and then we'd be like, if I were a god, I would have thought of that, because choking on food is stupid.
Yeah, it's like Neil deGrasse Tyson says about the lower end of the body. It's an amusement park in a sewage treatment plant. Right. It's just gross. I know, but still somehow,
but fun.
We still have get down with it. But so yeah, talk a little bit more about the idea that there are no transitional fossils. And
so this is obviously something anthropologists, and I can comfortably say scientists in general, don't ascribe to. So the kind of common answer to that is that every fossil is transitional, right? So
my fossil in 10,000 years will be considered a transitional fossil.
Well, not if you don't have kids.
No, but fuck.
Yeah, your fossil's worth nothing.
Yeah, that's all right.
You have to transition to something.
Why should it be different in death than it is in life?
Right, yeah, exactly.
So, you know, the basic idea is those small changes I was saying before. Every new generation is going to change a little bit. And so you're transitioning. So you can think of yourself as a transition between your parents and your offspring. That's perfectly valid. Can you look at your parents, yourself, and your offspring and notice any huge differences? No, but the time scale there is so tiny, you wouldn't see them anyway.
Well, my parents are Trump supporters. So that should certainly be visible in the fossil remains.
Yeah.
Right.
So, well, yes. When they dig up their skulls and see the MAGA just sort of scratched onto that, onto the foreheads there.
So yeah, every fossil is a transitional fossil.
Yeah.
But there are ones that are clearly an in between of this, you know, I saw PZ Myers talking about whale transitional fossils, and they're amazing. There's these amazing middle steps between very ancient and more modern.
Yeah, the whale's a great example just because the change is so substantial, right? I'm more familiar with the human fossil record, but in the case of whales, you know, you're losing legs there. But we do, you know, we see this transition in the Middle East from something that is land dwelling to sea dwelling, and they're just losing their hips and legs. And actually, if I recall correctly, you actually do sometimes get modern whales born with little
vestigial
things.
Wow.
But I don't, again, not my but as far as humans go, I think a lot of the time people are expecting us to be able to look at the fossil record, look at these things on the ground and say, okay, this person evolved from this person, evolved from this person, and trace it back to ourselves, which that's very tricky for a variety of reasons. One, we have something called the fossil bias, which is just, you know, jargon for saying that not everything that's ever lived is going to be preserved. And so we're dealing with this subsample.
Right.
But you can still see major trends, right? I can see in the fossil record when apes start to be bipedal. I can see when brain size starts to increase. And so while we might not know exactly which species gave rise to whom, this transition from a quadrupedal ape to this upright walking and then intelligent critter is very clear.
Right. And so that leads to another one of the classic creationist canards, which is, if humans evolved from monkeys, why are there still monkeys?
Yeah, and I see this one a lot, and it's kind of I don't know why anymore. I mean, I know why. I'm sorry, but you know, even folk like Ken Ham have put up on their, you know, their answers in Genesis, like, "Hey, please don't say this," because, like,
oh, really?
Yeah, it's
because it's so dumb.
Yeah, it's like this is not a good argument. I mean, and you know, none of Ken Ham's arguments are good arguments,
right.
but he recognizes how bad this one is, and the confusion there is that we're not evolved. You know, and I'm just going to use chimps as a reference. You know, people say monkeys. It's a pretty broad category, but our most related critter to us is the chimp. We didn't evolve from chimps. Chimps and humans share a common ancestor. And so if this change that's very slow is occurring over many generations, Sometimes this is just change in a single direction, right? Humans 200,000 years ago aren't identical to humans today, but they're still humans. But sometimes they're splits, right? So if we go back far enough, there was a single species that, two groups of them got isolated from each other, and one would ultimately end in chimps and one would end in humans. And so humans and chimps are really cousins. One's not the ancestor of another. Right. So are humans evolved from an ape? Yes. Are humans evolved from any modern ape? No.
Right.
So am I a chimp or a human? Which one do we have to do, like the 23andMe to find out specifically?
As your attorney, I'm advising you not to answer that. It could get really ugly in here. So, but chimps, in the same way we are still developing.
Oh, absolutely.
In whatever way they're developing.
Yes, a chimp today, you don't expect to look like whatever that common ancestor was. They've evolved too. We often, another point that people want to bring up is we don't know exactly what that common ancestor is, and maybe it seems unintuitive, but we don't have to know, right? We can figure out that it exists based on lots of, we playfully call it the Chuman, which a name I'm rather fond of.
Yeah, that's cool.
But we don't have to know.
Right. And I think we talked a little bit earlier about this bias that humans have, that we need to feel special among species, and that probably comes out of a lot of bad understandings of nature and some religious training, et cetera, et cetera. But we are not none of the animals and the plants and the things you see in this world right now are the end. I mean, unless we fuck it all up and everything dies in the next election, which is entirely possible.
Totally possible.
But we're 100,000, 200,000, 300,000 years from now, whatever we are will be different. Whatever chimpanzees are will likely be different, right?
Yeah, I mean, this process is still continuing, and that's a much more interesting question than I think. I mean, no scientist is really, well, not no scientist, but most scientists are not arguing about evolution, but trying to figure out where it's headed, that's something that's really difficult to do. But yeah, we expect it to continue, right?
Ooh,
I mean,
I just thought, I guess suddenly it just occurred to me that one of the exciting, I mean, we've read all of the science fiction about genetic engineering and stuff, but like even if we're not actively CRISPRing our genome or whatever, we can actually
affect it,
guide our evolution to some extent.
Oh, and we absolutely have. So, I mean, we've done, the first domestic animal was the dog,
right? As
far as I know, and we've fucked up the dog more than a little bit.
We mess with those guys.
Yeah, isn't that a great example to talk for people to understand a sort of selection, right?
It's dangerous, though, too, because they say, well, look, that was human-guided, and therefore human evolution must have been guided by something, too.
Oh, okay.
Insert God here. But it occurs...
But we're not talking to those dumbasses.
Yeah. No, we're not. But humans have done it to themselves. I mean, we talk about, differences in reproduction. I mentioned that earlier. But cultural factors matter, right? So what's going on culturally affects how you reproduce. And so humans alter their environment, whether that's social or, you name it, climate change, whatever, we are going to biologically respond to that.
Right. Yeah, and I think about like advances in modern medicine, things that killed off humans for millennia have stopped killing us off.
Right.
So we're not going to be selecting as much for like, that person has the vibe that will survive the plague or whatever. You know what I mean?
And I would imagine that part of natural selection is, say, some a stressor like smallpox, right?
Yeah.
That we've now eradicated, hopefully. Yeah. If these fucking anti-vaxxer parents will not bring it all back someday. But that's changed because there's a different outcome in offspring and survival rates.
Yeah, it seems like now we're selecting much more for brain power than we are for physical power the way we used to. I mean, in general, that doesn't apply in New Jersey, obviously. But I just feel like in a lot of places, what we're selecting for is very different than what it would have been even 100 years ago or 200 years ago, let alone 3,000 years ago.
Definitely. And Mark's example of smallpox. I think it was Mark that said it.
Yeah.
Anyway, but you think of like the plague in Europe. Lots of studies have been done about, okay, this is a lot of people dying off. That should fundamentally change what's going on genetically in this population.
Yeah.
And one of the neat findings is there were, genes that were selected for that increased in frequency because the people who carried them were more likely to survive the plague.
Interesting.
And the neatest, maybe not the neatest part, but a neat follow-up was that same gene seems to also confer or give an individual a somewhat innate protection against HIV. And so we have these folk who kind of are naturally a little bit more resistant, not immune, but resistant to the virus because of this.
Because of the plague.
Because of the plague.
Oh.
And part of the intensity of the plague was, and we've talked about this before on the show, was this bizarre fixation that European Christians had with cats, and that they killed cats in huge numbers. Cats were considered evil animals, and it was one of their only natural defenses against the spread of pestilence was cats.
Yeah.
And so
I still think they're evil, but they are helpful in keeping the plague.
they'll
at
catch
bay.
a rat from time to time.
They will.
Mark
Yeah.
has cats. Just
I'm a cat person. You're outnumbered on this show. Uncle Doug and I are both
That's true.
crazy old cat ladies.
You
so.
very much are.
We have the crazy old cat lady gene, apparently.
that one got through.
So,
yeah.
kind of to conclude, I'm just curious, what's one of your favorite kind of stories from, the world of evolution and kind of how you work in the evolutionary anthropology science, which is a very specific one. What's a story that's really terrific?
You mean like something that happened like prehistorically?
Yeah, whatever. It's just something that's a great illustration of evolution for our fans out there.
Oh, well, there are many of them. So I mean, maybe one of the most famous is lactase persistence, which
That's a milk thing?
it's a milk thing. So everyone's familiar with lactose intolerance, right?
Right.
And we have this tendency to think of lactose intolerance as almost a disorder, right?
Right,
right.
And really, that's mostly a European bias. Lactose intolerance is the default human state. Most people are lactose intolerant. Lactose tolerance shows up as a mutation, 10,000-ish years ago, as a response to dairying, right? So when food resources are scarce and you're living in a field with animals and you've got nothing to eat.
And you see that little baby cow eating something.
Well,
On
and
the
people had eaten dairy before that. They made something called kumis, which is only worth mentioning because it's disgusting. They would take mare's milk and they would like put it in a gourd and like spit in it and shake it up, and it would ferment the milk sugar out of
It was
it.
booze.
It was mildly alcoholic milk,
Yeah.
room temperature milk. It's disgusting.
Blech.
If they wanted more protein, sometimes they would add blood to it.
It was a White Russian. It was a White Russian.
But raw milk has many more calories in it. So if you are facing starvation, if you can drink fresh milk and survive and not have the debilitating gas, diarrhea, all this kind of that wonderful stuff, it's hugely beneficial. So we see this mutation, which is quite literally a break in a gene. So most mammals drink milk when they're young and then can't drink it later. That mechanism broke in some human populations, and then it swept through the population like wildfire. So we see most Europeans who are descended from dairying populations back in the past are lactose tolerant now.
Ha-ha!
And
Suckers.
See, we're better.
What you do is you kick that little baby cow out of the way and you get yours.
I don't know.
Go get yours.
I don't think better's the right word, because some people who are lactose intolerant don't get symptoms. So what does this mean? This means these people can eat ice cream, get way fewer calories out of it, and not have the symptoms. So, I mean, that's some bullshit.
That's fancy.
I'm fairly jealous of it.
That's an excellent mutation.
Yeah. And then I got my friend who if she eats a little tiny bit of any dairy, just is miserable for a day and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, she should have descended from the right people.
She should have. It's a matter of badly descending.
It's not European specific. We see it show up in parts of West Africa and the Middle East, but obviously, concepts of diet, especially in this country, have been dominated by studies on Europeans or people of European descent. And so you look at the food pyramid and there's dairy sitting as one of these big categories you should eat, whereas there's a lot of people who that's
just not possible.
Not a good thing at all.
Not a comfortable life.
Yeah, not comfortable. Yeah.
Right. And then there's, of course, the Jordan B. Peterson gene, which is just eat all beef.
Yeah. And feel terrible.
That's also all of Argentina and Uruguay.
And it's clearly done wonders for him. So anyway, well, that's the evolution of Jordan B. Peterson, people. So that's been...
And that's what we were really aiming at for this segment.
It took us a while to get there, though.
Yeah.
We finally made it. So with that finally achieved, Professor
Nathan, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Dan is consonant intolerant, so
it's not easy for
it's
me.
a specialty. So thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. And let's move on.
Moving on.